Hi guys. So sorry I'm out sick today, but unfortunately that's nothing that I can control. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys had some notes so that you could go through this and then have your assignment to work on. So we're going to go through factoring trinomials. You can see what's highlighted here is ax squared plus bx plus c. That's generic form for any trinomial. The steps that are listed below, you can read through them yourself, so you can hit pause and take a minute to read through them. And when you're ready, I'll be ready to go on to showing you how to use them. So the first thing that you always look for when you're factoring is what we were doing on Friday, which is to factor out a GCF. So 3, 14, and 8, look at the 3 because it's your smallest number, and look at the factors because 3 only has 3 and 1, and those don't work for 14 and 8. There's no greatest common factor. So then you're going to do basically the same thing on all these, where you're going to take the A number and the C number, which are these two, and you're going to multiply them together. And that's going to give you the multiplication number. So in this case, let me try to get myself some new space. Your multiplication number is going to be 24. And your add number always comes from the one in the middle, which is that positive 14. So now you're going to see what numbers can you get to add up to 14. I'm pretty sure you guys have done this before, so this should look a little bit familiar. So what two numbers multiply to give you 24 but also add up to 14? Let's see. Multiplication for 24. You have 1 and 24, that adds up to 25. You have 2 and 12, and that seems to work for both. So those are your two numbers that you would pick, because 2 and 12 multiply and add to give you these things. So your two magic numbers here are going to be positive 2 and positive 12. So the next step is to basically take those numbers and you're going to write what we call temporary factors. So over here by the original problem, I'm going to write x plus 2 because it was a positive 2, and x plus 12 because it was a positive 12. And then, this is really important, because that number had or the x squared had a 3 in front of it, you're going to put that underneath both of these numbers. And then you're going to try to reduce. Clearly 2/3 does not reduce, so this 3 is going to then move up here and go in front of your x. So it's going to look like 3x plus 2 for that parenthesis. However, this 12 over 3 does reduce to a positive 4. So since that reduces to a whole number, that's going to stay x plus 4. And then your problem's done. So remember, we're still working on unfoiling, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, the next one, we're going to multiply 3 times negative 2. And so the multiplication for this one's going to be negative 6. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. And then our middle number, because it just says negative x, that means that our add number is going to be negative 1. So you have to kind of brainstorm, use your multiplication number to help you brainstorm what multiplies to give you negative 6 that adds up to negative 1. Just a little hint, whenever your add number is 1 or negative 1, your two numbers have to be back-to-back numbers, like 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, that type of thing. So using that as our guide, we know that negative 3 times positive 2 gives me negative 6, but also works for my adding. So those are my two numbers. Okay, my magic numbers for this one are going to be negative 3 and 2. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do x minus 3 and x plus 2 because of the positive negative signs. And then again, you pay attention that there's a 3 in front, and you're going to divide by that 3. Then you try to reduce those fractions that you just created. 3 over 3 gives me a minus 1, and 2 over 3 doesn't work. So I'm going to get x minus 1, and then that 3 is going to bump up in front of the x and be a 3x plus 2. And if you wanted to ever check, you could totally check by foiling these back together, the ones that I'm boxing in, and it should get you back to what you started with, that 3x squared minus x minus 2. So why don't you try this one together or on your own, hit pause, and then come back and check my work. So hit pause now and check it. So over to the side, I did my side steps that are multiplication and addition, and I came up with my numbers being -6 and 5. So I'm going to go ahead and write my temporary factors of x minus 6 and x plus 5. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide by that 5 that was in front. When I reduce 6, I get nothing, but when I reduce that 5 over 5, I get a positive 1. So I'm going to bump my 5 here out in front because it didn't reduce, and this one's going to be x plus 1. So that's my final answer. Ooh, that's bad. I love that one. Okay, looking at the fourth one, your number in front on the very first term is a 1. Hopefully you recognize that. So when you multiply, you're going to multiply 1 times 20 here. So that gives me, for my multiplication step, a positive 20. For my adding, I get a negative 12. So you have to brainstorm. Remember, I know sometimes your times tables are a struggle bus. So you have to go through and do like 20 divided by 2, 20 divided by 3, 20 divided by 4, and all that to brainstorm what you get. In this case, you come up with, since your multiply number is positive, you either have to have both positives or both negatives. And since this number down here is negative, right there, we're going to have to use 2 negatives. So how about -2 and -10 for this one? Okay. Go ahead and set up your, so set up your x minus 2. Oops. We need x. Then we need our -2, and then our x minus 10. And the number that you would divide by here is a 1. And when you divide by 1, you still get x minus 2 and x minus 10. So that's your answer. Try this one on your own. Hit pause and go all the way through it. Okay, so here's all the steps. Now, don't forget, I know this is not my favorite how we started this, but you need to start over here with this stuff and walk your way through starting there. And then kind of come back to the left side and do all the rest of your work. Okay? So we have like one more problem to go. I was wrong. How about 3 more? So on this one, we're going to do our multiplication with our 9 times -8. And that gives us -72. And then our adding number is going to be -6. Now, this one seems to get a lot of people because -72 is a big number that has lots of factors. So you have to make sure when you're making your little list, you start, with 1 and 72, 236, and you keep going so that you don't stop short of the ones that you need. If you make that little list, it should help you, and you should come up with -12, +6 would be your 2 numbers. That when you multiply them, you get -72, and you add them, you get -6. Okay, so once we get that established, we can again go x, and we're going to have -12 for one and +6 for the other. And it doesn't matter which order you write those down. This one's pretty important, and we haven't seen this yet. This is the first one that we're going to see that does something different when we divide by that number that's out in front. So in this case, we divide by a 9, right? And when I divide by a 9 and I look at 12 over 9, it doesn't reduce to a whole number, but you can reduce it to a lower terms fraction. And that's exactly what you need to do, because both of these can be divided by a 3, and so that can reduce to 4/3. Likewise, 6/9 reduces to 2/3. On your calculator, under math, there's a function that says fraction that we've talked about. If you type in 12/9 or -12/9 and hit frac, it'll reduce it for you. But the problem is that still leaves us with fractions. So we need to now take these numbers that we have from being reduced and put them out in front. So then this is going to become 3x minus 4 and 3x plus 2 for our final answer. 8, 9, and 1. They don't have any GCFs, but they definitely can be multiplied and all that good stuff. So we get our 8 times 1 gives us 8 for our multiplication step here. Not sure what just happened. Okay, let's try that again. 8 times 1 gives us 8. And then our add part in the middle is going to be a negative 9. So again, watch your signs here. So since our multiplication part was positive, but the adding part's negative, that tells us both numbers have to be negatives. So how about a negative 8 and a negative 1? Work for both. So then I'm going to have x minus 8 and x minus 1. And then the number that I divide by is this 8 here in front. And 8 over 8 does reduce to 1, so that's nice that it goes to a whole number. And 1 over 8 doesn't reduce at all, so it becomes 8 in front of that x minus 1. So this thing had to move up here. Last one. No GCF again. So last but not least, we're going to do one more multiplication, and we get positive 30. So we know that our two numbers are either both positives or both negative. So this next part determines that. So since we have negative 17 here, that tells us we're looking for two negative numbers. So those two numbers would be negative 15 and negative 2. So I'm going to write those down. I'm going to fill in my x's here in just a second. So I have my x minus 15 and my x minus 2. And then hopefully you're on board with what we do next, which is divide by that 5 that's out in front. And then you can reduce that. So 15 over 5 reduces to a minus 3. 2 over 5 doesn't reduce, so we're going to bump that 5 to the front. So we end up with x minus 3, and then 5x minus 2 as our final answer. So I know that was really fast, and I know it takes you a lot longer to come up with these two numbers that we came up with on every one of them. So you're probably going to have to take a second after you set up these two blanks that I did and brainstorm the multiplication part of that. Like what gives you 30 on this problem, or what gives you 8 on the last problem. Okay, if it doesn't jump out at you, that's not a big deal. You just have to stick with it to figure those out. Okay, so now you should go get your paper from the sub or from your other teachers and finish your homework assignment or start your homework assignment. No need to turn anything in. We'll get everything when I come back. Have a good day.